and welcome to Music 101. Music 101 is created to empower music itself and legendary icon in the music industry. Another great week, another great topic on Music 101. Born to Boogie Canned Heat. Wow. How are you going to introduce our topic for today, Mr. Meg?
Well, to introduce them, this is the Born to Boogie Can Heat. So, as country blues bands go, Can Heat are among the very elite in terms of boogie power. They are unrivaled. Can Heat's the band whose motto was, "Don't forget the boogie." We're in danger of being forgotten after enjoying a terrific heyday in the 1960s and early 1970s when their brand of honest, raw, and integrity-packed blues rock had them perennial festival favorites and ensured that they sold big on a string of classic albums, a handful of singles, On the Road Again, Going Up the Country, and Let's Work Together. They are now being reevaluated and enjoyed. Core members Alan Blind Owl Wilson, Bob the Bear Height, Larry the Mole Taylor, Henry the Sunflower Vestine, and Fido Cat's Eyes de la Para specialized in psych trippy R&B that was graced with the individual members' insane musical ability. Wilson was recognized as the prime exponent of chromatic harmonica during his all too short lifetime, while Height was no slouch on that instrument either and also bossed the vocal mic. Wilson and Vestine shared electric and acoustic guitar duties with equal panache, and the rhythm section of De La Para and Taylor maintained a hypnotic beat. I did manage to see the vestiges of Canned Heat long after their heyday at a music festival in Bergen County, New Jersey. The thrill was to view a band that I had listened to and enjoyed for years when they were at the height of their popularity. Archetypal anti heroes of the hippie era, Canned Heat endured awful luck and personal tragedy. Wilson and Height died much too young, and Vestine also perished in sad circumstances. Although their exploits are so legendary that we're hardly telling tales out of school when we refer to the band's prestigious use of illicit substances and overindulgence in alcohol, Canned Heat are not defined by the unfortunate episodes that marred their progress. Rather, they seem strengthened by the adversity and emerged as cursed survivors. We love their music, especially the classic era discs that span 1965 origins onwards, and will include acclaimed outings with John Lee Hooker. Their live albums are also celebrations of the blues form, and for those who are curious enough to test the waters, there are several high class compilations to start that process. Although they came together in the crucible of Topanga Canyon and recorded in Los Angeles, Canned Heat weren't entirely a product of the California dream. Alan Wilson gravitated west from Boston with his friend, sometimes mentor, and fellow musicologist John Fahey. Both men shared a devout love for the blues of Skip James, Son House, Charlie Patton, and Tommy Johnson, the man whose song Canned Heat, a woe-filled warning to those poor folks who drank the cheap ethanol the title referred to would give them their name. The actual name of the song is Canned Heat Blues by both Tommy Johnson and Ishman Bracey. Bob Height was another avid music collector with unmatched taste whose travels through the Deep South in search of vintage vinyl allowed him to amass an unmatched and priceless warehouse full of important 78s. Vestine was also well versed in the blues and had played briefly in an earlier incarnation of the Mothers of Invention. Legend has it that Frank Zappa asked him to leave because Henry was too freaky. That may be apocryphal, but it probably isn't too much because Vestine was a very drastic and somewhat unhinged individual, but still a mighty guitarist. The irony is that the really out there Zappa found another unique musician too strange even for him. Ian Hunter, my favorite songwriter, tells a story about Zappa that he goes invited to his home to listen to his music. When Frank asked Ian what he thought, Hunter was befuddled since the music was so far out and avant garde he didn't know what to say without insulting the iconoclastic Zappa. To know more about Ian, refer to my volume On Track Ian Hunter, available on Amazon. In any case, Canned Heat's earliest recordings were made with Johnny Otis in 1965, blues standards all. At that time, the rhythm section was Frank Cook on drums, more of a jazz cat, really, and avant-garde bassist Stuart Brotman, who hung around for the sessions before departing to join Kaleidoscope. He was replaced by future Spirit stalwart Mark Andis. The young Canned Heat Blues Band, a jug ensemble with a lot more going on besides, played at the Human Be-In in 1967. The Human Be-In took place on January 14th, 1967, at the Polo Grounds in Golden Gate Park, San Francisco. This iconic event, often considered a prelude to the Summer of Love the next year, featured a variety of musical acts that were central to the emerging San Francisco countercultural scene. In addition to Canned Heat, there's a list of bands and musical acts known to have performed at the Human Be-In: the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, Quicksilver Messenger Service, Big Brother and the Holding Company featuring Janis Joplin, and Blue Cheer. These bands were staples of the San Francisco music scene and played a significant role in defining the psychedelic rock of the sound of the era. While other musicians and performers, such as poets and speakers Allen Ginsberg, Timothy Leary, were also part of the event, the list represents the primary musical acts documented as having performed. Dizzy Gillespie was reported in the audience, but there's no evidence he performed. The event was characterized by its free-form nature, with music provided from a makeshift stage on a flatbed truck, amplifying the communal and improvisational spirit of the day. Some managers had started to look after the group, and they saw them mesmerize a crowd at a UCLA frat party where they co-headlined with The Doors. In June 1967, Canned Heat were a big hit at the Monterey Pop Festival, and Downbeat magazine decided they even seen the future of white blues genius in the shape of Wilson and Vestine. Part of their set is available to view on D.A. Pennebaker's documentary event, So Seeing is Believing. The appearance promoted their visibility, and in 1967, the group signed to Liberty Records. Their first album proper, simply entitled Canned Heat, 1967, was produced by Cal Carter and followed the formula of only playing blues covers. Signed to Liberty Records, Canned Heat suffered the first of a long line of internally afflicted disasters when they were busted in Denver, Colorado, and made the local news for all the wrong reasons. But that debacle began to lend them the outlaw chic that was both a boon and that they attracted a hardcore biker crowd, and a liability once record company execs came face to face with their entourage. The actual album is wonderful, with excellent versions of Rollin' and Tumblin' by Muddy Waters, Dust My Broom, Robert Johnson, Elmore James, and a lengthy take on Robert Petway's Catfish Blues that give them their boogie on a template. In 1967, by July, the self-titled album had made it number 76 on the album charts. While this album sold well enough in California, it was the ensuing Boogie with Canned Heat that rewarded them with household name status in 1968, since it featured original material like Alan Wilson's reworking of Floyd James's On the Road Again that went top 10, with guests Dr. John and Sunnyland Slim adding piano. Dr. John also gets credit for his horn arrangement, and this became an ultra hip artifact of the time and sold well in Europe and as well as in America. In conclusion, the band got off the ground and they were just getting started.
Definitely getting it started, Mr. Mick. So when were the Heat at their height?
Well, the Boogie with Canned Heat was released on January 21st, 1968, and it spent over a year in the Billboard charts, peaking at number 16. Whereas their debut album was largely made of covers, including the almost obligatory for a blues band take on Dust My Broom, their second album was largely self-written and remains a fan firm favorite with just about everybody who loves the blues. A significant reason for its success is because it included the magnificent On the Road Again, which made number 16 on the Hot 100 in the late summer of 1968. Chicago bluesman Floyd James recorded a song entitled On the Road Again in 1953, itself a remake of another of his songs from 2 years earlier called Dark Road. Both of these songs are based on Tommy Johnson's 1928 Big Road Blues. So at this point, Canned Heat decided to record On the Road Again as a demo in April of 67 as the RCA Studios in Chicago with original drummer Frank Cook. This version was over 7 minutes long with added harp and guitar solos. During the recording of Boogie with Canned Heat, they recorded it again, this time with new drummer Adolfo Fito de la Parra at the Liberty Records studio in Los Angeles in September 1967. The song uses a one-chord boogie riff inspired by John Lee Hooker's 1949 hit Boogie Chillin', And Blind Owl Wilson used verses from Jones's On the Road Again and Dark Road, as well as adding some of his own lyrics. But a lot of the appeal is in the performance. Wilson's Skip James inspired falsetto vocal and his fabulous harp playing make this something special. On the Road Again went to number 8 in the UK. Other standout cuts on the album include World in a Jug, the B side of On the Road Again, and a stern warning about drugs with Amphetamine Annie, and their warning that speed kills, and the subject of the song, Annie, winds up dead. One highlight is the 11-minute extravaganza of Fried Hockey Boogie. The band reworked the tune as Woodstock Boogie when they played the celebrated festival in August of 1969. Woodstock, of course, is where Chipmunk was the last minute voice of Woodstock and is the subject of one of my upcoming music projects. Besides the five-man band, the album also features a cameo from pianist Sunnyland Slim on Turpentine Moan. Dr. John also plays piano on the album and did the horn arrangement. His own debut album, Gree, was released on the same day in 1968, January 21st. With Larry Taylor and Fido de la Parra now holding down the backbeat, they went from strength to strength on the double Living the Blues 1968. Wilson again hitting pay dirt with his brilliant Going Up the Country in tone in his trademark spectral falsetto. Going Up the Country would become the unofficial anthem of the Woodstock Festival the following year. Side one of this epic item is comprised of formerly perfect blues, but the second side soars away on a suite called Parthogenesis, rollicking, psychedelic, and exciting. And then this offers another 40 minutes plus of Canned Heat live at the Kaleidoscope, Hollywood. And they were that club's house band for most of 1968, blowing up a storm on their Refried Boogie Parts 1 and 2. In conclusion, they were now at the height of popularity, but there was still more boogie to come.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for all those boogies and melodies. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Mick, how has there more boogie going up the country?
The inspired new single was a memorable follow up to the band's debut hit On the Road Again. Again, the specialists are top notch. Jazz crusader Joe Sample is on piano, Dr. John struts his stuff, John Fahey adds guitar, and John Mayall delivers some crisp keyboards. Most striking of all is the double track flute played by Jim Horn on Going Up the Country that gives this classic single an immediately euphoric effect. The song that went on to be seen by many as the unofficial anthem of the Woodstock Festival landed on British shores in January 1969. Canned Heat's Going Up the Country had already become a memorable follow-up to their debut hit On the Road Again in America and was en route to a number 11 peak there when it debuted on the UK chart. Once again, featuring the distinctive and unusual lead vocals of Blind Owl Wilson, the new single underlined Canned Heat's passion for blues history and being based very obviously around Henry Thomas's 1928 recording, Bulldoze Blues. Even the striking melody of that disc, played on quills similar to panpipes, was recreated on flute for the rock era version. Indeed, the band had taken their very name from another disc cut that same year, Tommy Johnson's Canned Heat Blues. This is also deep into blues history. And interestingly enough, according to music experts, it's very likely that the street musician who appears in a short sequence at Maxwell Street Market in Heinrich Hauser's film Chicago is Henry Thomas. The people in the background are probably the protagonists of a medicine show, and Thomas can be seen at the 4-minute and 13-minute second mark, Going Up the Country. So Transatlantic Boogies in the UK, the Los Angeles band had already bonded with an audience hungry for modern day blues music, not only with the number 8 success of On the Road Again in September 1968, but with Boogie with Canned Heat. The album proceeded into the charts and then climbed to a number 5 peak in October. Going Up the Country entered the UK listings in the first chart of 1969 at number 45, and 3 weeks later had climbed to number 22. After faltering for 2 weeks, it surged again to a number 19 peak. The following summer, Canned Heat seemed to capture the very essence of Woodstock when they performed it in their set at the celebrated festival. Canned Heat's biggest hit, Let's Work Together, would follow in the UK early in 1970. But by the time it entered the US charts, all of 9 months further on, Wilson was, sadly, no longer around, passing away after a drug overdose in September that year. In conclusion, Ken Heat was hot with hits on the charts and appearing at Woodstock.
Yes, can he again? Thank you so much for your legacy. So, Mr. Mick, is it not Canned Heat also known for their progressive blues days?
Hallelujah in 1969 and Future Blues are progressive blues discs of the first order and cry out to be discovered today. Vestine left after the former, but was replaced by another mercurial guitarist and Harvey Mandel. Hallelujah contains Canned Heat's favorites like Wilson's Get Off My Back and Haight's anti-camp cop anthem, Sick 'em Pigs. There were numerous anti police actions because at the time they were cracking down on young people and, of course, drug busts, as well as the band had had their issues with law enforcement at the time. And it all comes spilling out in this song. The terrific B side to Poor Moon was banned by many radio stations. The song features grunting, snorting pig noises by the band. At the end of the song, Henry the Sunflower Vestine says, if you're looking for a way to serve God and country, and if you are big, strong, and stupid, we want you. The actual phone number of the LAPD is on the song, while the last line is remedial courses are available for the culturally deprived. This is in your face social commentary. So, with this and Future Blues on Hallelujah returns them to the charts thanks to a spirited reworking of Wilbert Harrison's Let's Work Together, which is arguably the definitive reading of this often covered tune. Dr. John was on hand for the third album running, and the Heat Hombres had come to the production floor with Skip Taylor, revealing a more sophisticated sound that boded well for the new decade. Wilbert Harrison was an American rhythm and blues singer, pianist, guitarist, and harmonica player known for hits like Kansas City and Let's Work Together. And there's a breakdown of songs by Wilbert Harrison. He turns out to be very influential. These are recorded by both the Beatles and Canned Heat. The Beatles recorded one song written by Wilbert Harrison, Kansas City. This was written by the exceptional songwriting team of Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller in 1952. First recorded by Harrison in 1959 and became a #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. The Beatles included it in their repertoire early in their career, performing it live during their Hamburg and Cavern Club days. They recorded a version of Kansas City as part of a medley with Little Richard's Hey, 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 Hey for their 1964 album Beatles for Sale. This also then was recorded, at least Harrison's song by Canned Heat was performed by Wilbert Harrison, Let's Work Together. He first recorded this song in 1962 as Let's Stick Together and later re-recorded it in 1969 as Let's Work Together, which became a top 10 hit for him in 1970. Canned Heat covered Let's Work Together in 1970, releasing it as a single from their album Future Blues. And this version, driven by Bob the Bear's Heights vocals and Alan Wilson's distinctive guitar work, became a major hit, reaching the top 10 in several countries, #2 in the UK, and arguably surpassing Harrison's own success with the song. The band discovered the track through Height, an avid record collector, who introduced them to Harrison's 1969 version. Both the Beatles and Canned Heat drew on Harrison's catalog, but each chose a different song that aligned with their stylistic strengths: rock and roll roots for the Beatles and blues boogie for Canned Heat. Harrison's original contributions were limited, but his songs gained significant traction through these covers. In conclusion, Canned Heat pushed the limits of blues into progressive, more modern blues sounds.
Certainly. Blue sounds. So, in addition to Woodstock, what other live appearances are they known for?
Yeah, just as they became massive, Canned Heat was dismayed by Wilson's death in 1970. On the eve of a prestigious return to Europe for a German engagement and then England to play at Hyde Park, Wilson's body was found in the undergrowth of Height's Topanga home. The Heat had already been seen on British shores earlier in the year at the Bath Festival, and many who witnessed their performance rated them at the zenith of blues rock, and this during the era when the revival of that form was all the rage. So at this festival, They had played 6 different songs, and the Bath and Music Festival was a festival played at 1970, and it featured a lineup of top American West Coast and British bands of the day, including Donovan, Mothers of Invention, Santana, The Flock, Led Zeppelin, Hot Tuna, Country Joe McDonald, Coliseum, Jefferson Airplane, The Byrds, Moody Blues, Dr. John, Frank Zappa, Canned Heat, of course, It's a Beautiful Day, Steppenwolf, Johnny Winter, John Mayall, Pink Floyd, Fairport Convention, and Keith Hartley. The lineup eclipsed the more famous Isle of Wight Festival held in August of the same year, but it attracted less press coverage and was a smaller affair. You can also check out their live recording 70 Live in Europe, recorded at London's Royal Albert Hall and other UK venues, a 5-star summary of their work. It's only too bad it wasn't a double disc or more. What you get to hear is Wilson's slide guitar skill, height at his vocal peak, and Mandel's splintering lead. The Taylor De La Parra axis holds the center together brilliantly on That's All Right Mama, London Blues, and the Dizzy Back Out on the Road medley. In conclusion, with many changes and misfortune, the band still rocked.
Definitely, totally rock. And again, thank you so much for your legacy. So, Mr. Mick, or what is the fairy collaboration between two blues legends?
Well, Hooker in Heat, a record that I played to death in 1971, still features Alan Wilson, albeit posthumously, another double album, this time helmed by Bob Haidt. It dates back to Wilson's final spring. It is an evocative and poignant document that allows the great John Lee Hooker room to do his thing while the Heat cooked behind him. It was also John Lee's first charting disc, reaching 78 on the Billboard Hot 100. Rare reviews for Hookers and Heat were obviously tempered by despair at Wilson's demise. At only age 27, he became yet another victim of that particular number. Brian Jones, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Graham Parsons, Tim Buckley, and Kurt Cobain being other members of that unfortunately 2,700 club. With mutual appreciation for each other's prowess, John Lee Hooker and Can Heat collaborated on the smoking album Hooker in Heat. The double album was released in 1971 as a fascinating meeting of mentor and proteges. Can Heat had long admired John Lee Hooker and was delighted to find out that the revered blues guitarist singer also enjoyed the band's music. I sure like the way you guys boogie, Hooker told harmonica player Alan Wilson at a chance meeting in Los Angeles. Can Heat floated the idea of recording together in April 1970. Hooker's record company gave him permission to do just that. 1 month later, they met at Liberty Records in LA to record the album. In deference to Hooker's genius, the boogie rock band, who had a global hit with On the Road Again in 1967, gave the first half of the album to him alone, and Hooker laid down compelling versions of his own compositions. Hooker arrived at the recording session wearing a plaid cap, leather jacket, black satin shirt, and the same old dress slacks, carrying his favorite old Epiphone guitar, and they captured the authentic blues sound. Of course, they had set him up on a plywood platform, well, to sit on while he played, one microphone on the amp, one to capture his vocals, and a third to pick up his distinctive stomping with his feet. Nearby was a large bottle of Chivas Regal Scotch and a pitcher of water to keep him well refreshed. For the second half of Hooker and Heat, Wilson joined in on piano, harmonica, and guitar. Blind Owl Wilson died 4 months later after the record was cut from a barbiturates overdose. He had suffered from depression, and the death robbed the world of one of the most gifted harmonica player I ever heard, as Hooker described him. But Hooker and Heat captures his wonderful talent for music, piano playing, and also guitar work. So where they had dug again into the deep part of the blues, they had picked up an old song to Tommy McLennan, Bottle Up and Go from 1939. And here, what we hear is their version of an old blues classic. And several of their songs, Alamonia Blues, Drifter, You Talk Too Much, and Burn in Hell, the whole band chimed in for the final songs. All sorts of soars and moves, even though, like, the band is sometimes frantically trying to keep up with Hooker's vocals. Hooker and Heat ended on a high, a rambling and powerful 11-minute version of Hooker's first record, the classic Boogie Chillin'. The song showed just how much Canned Heat were having recording and fun with their musical hero. After the album came out, again, they had replaced some of the other members of the band, and the Canned Heat and John Lee Hooker performed at Carnegie Hall in New York in 1971 to support the album, and a partial recording of the performance has been released Carnegie Hall 1971 by Cleopatra Records in 2015, which is one of those hard to get recordings. Maintaining the show must go on even after death and tragedy, Canned Heat regrouped for historical figures and ancient heads, and returning Vestine. Title references the way the band saw themselves in late 1971 as known musicians who might drop off the radar. And this was also followed up by the New Age 1973. In conclusion, the band rocked on with John Lee Hooker and made their last claim to fame with live performances and a progressive blues sound.
Definitely. So, Mr. Mick, how should we conclude this episode about canned heat?
For a career overview, I'd recommend that the interested listener discovers Let's Work Together, the best of Canned Heat, where you get to hear them in classic lineup. Also, Uncanned, the best of Canned Heat, which features a much longer and unreleased alternate take of On the Road Again, as well as gems from the catalog such as Human Condition and Owl Song and Amphetamine Annie. Not so much maligned, more overlooked, or consigned to the history books, it's now blindingly apparent that Canned Heat were the equal of many of their more successful peers and better than most of them. One of those groups, like the Doors, always sounded transcendental when heard crackling across the airwaves. Their recorded artifacts are well worth another look. As country bands go, they're among the very elite. In terms of boogie power, they are unrivaled. In conclusion, what happened to Canned Heat? They live on in our memories and in their recordings.
Certainly, again, we give you an applause. Canned heat. Thank you for sharing your legacy to the world. As Mr. Mick saying, Boogie by Canned Heat is one of the signature sounds of the late 1960s blues rock scene, reflecting the band's deep root in electric blues and boogie woogie rhythms. So, Mr. Mick, would you like to plug in something?
Sure, if you don't mind. I'm the Idea to Author coach on Facebook, where I help authors write books and sell more books. You can hear my podcast, the Doctor of Digital podcast, and of course, a couple volumes out on Amazon, Burning America, and also On Track Ian Hunter. Until next time, stay as well.
Yes, people, I want to plug in also our baby podcast with Mr. Mick, Mental Health 101 in its first season. And Mental Health 101 is created to empower and power mental health awareness. So please do listen Mental Health 101 wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Mick, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Good to see you again, my friend.
More to come, people. See you soon.